we started, I guess we'll call it a series now, that's the second time, but yesterday we spoke about the Sefer Nachal Eisan and different things that we learned about Chaim Kanievsky from that Sefer. And today, I'd like to move on to the next Sefer, or another Sefer, called the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan and the Taama de Kra. Now, this is, okay, I have an old version. Now it's 2 volumes and it's much fatter. But the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan is a Brisa, like Reb Chaim writes in the Hakdama, that most people don't even know about it or have learned it. But it's a Brisa that discusses many of the details of the Maisa Mishkan, of building the Mishkan. And he says it's an important thing to learn, but because a lot of the details are all over the place, so again, he quotes in the Hakdama, like he did in the Nachal Eisan, the Sefer Chasidim, that says that when there's something that no one's learning, it's like a meis mitzvah, and you have to go ahead and try to learn it. And therefore, he decided to write a perush on it and collect from all over the place the different achronim and poskim on it. He said, once I was learning it, I also had a few chidushim. So I threw those in as well. So that's the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan. The Taama de Kra is on the Chumash. It's his sefer on the Chumash. Now, why did he put them two together? Okay, he did publish svarim that were thin. It's not like he had to put these 2 books together. He could have made 2 thin ones. Okay, now it's 2 fat ones, but it could have been 2 thin ones. Why did he have to put it together? So one reason he said was because he wanted it to be tafel to the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan. He wanted it to be like secondary, maybe he thought people wouldn't buy the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan if it was just on its own, so he put it with the Chumash. And then he said a second reason, which is the one that's spoken about much more often, and he said that he didn't want to put out a sefer on Chumash just alone. Just things that it was based on Drash and Agada. We'll see what it is. It's mamish, an unbelievable sefer. But he said he didn't want to put that on his own, and he would quote that the Or Sameach is famous for 2 svarim that he wrote. One is the Or Sameach. The Or Sameach is on the Rambam. And the second set of svarim that the Or Sameach wrote is the Meshech Chachma, which is on the Chumash. And the Or Sameach he first published his Or Sameach on the Rambam. What they say is because they didn't want to be known as like a Chumash guy, someone who just writes on the Chumash, and that's why he put out the Or Sameach on the Rambam. But the Meshech Chachma on the Chumash is way more famous and used than the Or Sameach on the Rambam. But in order to set the tone, he put out the Or Sameach on the Rambam, and that was another reason that Chaim Kanievsky said that's why he's putting this together with the Brisa de Melechas HaMishkan, not to just put a sefer on Chumash on its own. He even once said that Reb Chaim Brisker, Chaim Soloveitchik, he wouldn't give a haskama to a sefer just on Chumash because he felt that a melus wasn't put into it. It's a person puts in some nice ideas, etc. So he wouldn't put a haskama on it, but a sefer on Pilpul. Even if he didn't think it was 100% correct, he'd give a haskama to it because he saw the amelus that went into it. So therefore, he said, for that same reason, I'm not going to put this sefer in it by itself. But just to appreciate this sefer Taama de Kra, Rav Chatzkel Abramsky, when he read it, he said that only a yachid in our door could have written such a thing. Okay, this isn't Torah Connections here. I'm saying, this is only a yachid in the door could have written the sefer. So when someone went back to Reb Chaim to tell him, he said, Reb Chatzkel Abramsky said that only a yachid b'dor could have written this thing. He said, yeah, it's because I quote sometimes things that I heard from the Chazon Ish that no one else knew. So that's why they're excited about it. But it had nothing to do with the things that I wrote. When did he think of these ideas on the Chumash? So he said he used to think about this ben gavra legavra, meaning on Shabbos, during Kriyas HaTorah, when one guy would finish his aliyah and the next guy was about to get his aliyah, he'd think about things on the Chumash, and Motzei Shabbos he'd go ahead and write it. In fact, this isn't just on Chumash, it's on also Navi, and it's also on the Megillah. So Megillah Esther specifically has a tremendous amount. And he kept on coming out every year, more Megillah Esther. And the reason was because some hold that on Purim you're supposed to try to avoid doing malacha. So therefore he would write only the Inyane Hayom, and that therefore he specifically spent more time learning Megillas Esther on Purim, and therefore had a lot more to write, and therefore he had a lot He had a lot on that. And there are incredible things in here. There are some things he quotes from the Chazon Ish, and he quotes things from the Stipler. Maybe I'll mention a couple from this week's Parsha just to bring us in a little bit. But like we said yesterday, it was Kol HaTorah Kula going into every letter that was either missing or added, or why this word wrote it this way and that. Like, it's unbelievable. Words that we would just like skim past, not even pay attention. Kol HaTorah Kula in there. One of the chizuks that I get when I learn Taama Dekra is you just see how vast the Torah is when you're just learning a simple pasuk. Think questions that sometimes I wouldn't even ask it because I think there's no way there's an answer to this. He's finding a Yerushalmi in Shkalim that now explains this pasuk. It's absolutely incredible how he brings everything all into the Torah over here. He quotes interesting in Parshas Pinchas. Okay, I'm going to tell you a few things that he writes in here because there's no end. We could learn Taama Dekra forever, and if I had a later version, I'd be able to tell you more. But I haven't brought myself to go buy it. But before we do that, at the end, he has another one-pager that's not on Chumash. I'll get there in a minute. Not a minute. At the end. And that was the basis of my second letter to Chaim Kanievsky. Okay? So we're not going to discuss my letters. With this letter, I will discuss. It caused an uproar. I did not intend it to cause an uproar, but it caused an uproar a little bit in the Olam HaYeshivas. And it was in I brought it in here. Yud Adar Toshin Samach Dalet. Okay, that's when I wrote. I was learning in the mirror at the time, and we had to clarify something that he wrote there on this one page stuck in the middle of the Taama Dekra. Many people don't even know it was there. Someone showed it to me, and we wrote about it, and then a lot of other people got a hold of the letter, and I'll discuss that at the end. Okay, so let's just to bring us in a little bit to just appreciate what different things that he writes about over here in the Sefer. Isn't just an Ashkafa piece in Parshas Pinchas. He writes that he quotes from the Dubla Magid that again they're very rare divrei Torah in there, like divrei Torah, that you would want to say over to the standard person on Shabbos. Some of them are a little bit like detail oriented, but there are some other things in there as well. I mean, the whole thing's amazing. Okay, sorry. But anyway, he quotes from the Dubna Magid that asked the Gra. The Dubna Magid asked the Gra, in what way he could be mashpia tzaddik on his generation. So the Gra answered him, gave him a mashal. He gave the Dubna Magid a mashal. He said that if you have a kli, if you have a cup, right, and that's totally full to the top, so ultimately it starts to fall over because the famous, I'm sure I've heard this a million times, it came from the Gra, said to the Dubna Magid, printed in the Taama Dekra, Parshas Pinchas, that you have the cup and you fill it up, so it's up to the top and it finally falls over to everything else. And he said that's what Chazal say in the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva in the Medrash Rabbah, that immediately it was Amdu Milu Kol Eretz Yisrael Torah, that the Torah was spread over on all the Talmidim after they became shleimim on their own, they became full. So on its own, there was a tremendous amount of hashpa. And then Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky adds on that he saw this by the Chazon Ish, that even though the Chazon Ish sat hidden in his room day and night, at the end of the day, he ended up being mashpia on the entire world, the Chazon Ish. So that was something that he writes in Parshas Pinchas. In Parshas Kiseitze, and this one is okay, just shows you his godless. So in Parshas Kiseitze, he writes, he quotes, the pasuk says, "V'kasa sever krisis," talks about a get that you give to a woman, that someone gives to a woman to get divorced. So the Gra said in the name of the Gra, that why is a get called a get? Okay, well, I never would have thought to ask such a question. But they asked the Gra, why do you call it a get? So he says, because the Gra said, because the letters Gimel and Tet aren't found anywhere in any pasuk ever next to each other. I mean, all the other letters are found next to each other, but the Gimel and the Tet are never next to each other, and therefore those letters represent distancing because they're never next to each other, and therefore it's called a get because those two letters are not anywhere. It's amazing, right? And that's anyone who learns Maseches Gittin, that's one of the first things you ever hear. Why they called a get? Because the Gra said that those two letters are never apart. However, Chaim Kanievsky points out that, but that's not true. because there are three other permutations of letters that don't show up in any of Tanakh. Gimel Kuf, Zayin Tet, and Zayin Tzadi Sofit. Isn't anywhere. So why don't we call the document a Zat, or a Gak, or a Zatz? Right? It's nowhere. Those three are nowhere in Kol Torah. Now, can you understand what that means? That Chaim Kanievsky knew, and when you hear about the Gra, you're like, wow, that's amazing. That's a Gra, that's amazing. And all of a sudden, Chaim Kanievsky had three more that is nowhere. So he doesn't say, let me tell you the three more. He asks that as a kasha on the Gra. He's bothered. How could the Gra have said that the Gimel Tes, that's the reason it's called a get, if there are three more things in Kol Torah Kula that aren't next to each other? And he has an answer. He says, because Gimel Tet is the first of those permutations. Ein Chanami, there are four, but Gimel Tet, because the next one is Gimel Kuf. Kuf comes after Tet. So Gimel Tet are the first of the first permutations of letters that don't find anywhere in Kol Torah Kula, and therefore. But can you imagine that he knew that? So someone once went to Chaim Kanievsky and he asked him, said, "How did you remember? How when you learn, right, you know every letter? How do you do that?" So he said, "No, I don't know that from my learning. What I did was I thought, where in Tanakh is there an Aleph and an Aleph next to each other? And then I said, where is there an Aleph and a Beis? And then I said, where is there an Aleph? I went through the whole thing, and I saw that there was no Gak, Zat, and Zatz. That's an unbelievable Maisa. Okay, anyway, that is in the time of the Kra, Parshas Ki Seitze. Okay, unbelievable. In Parshas Nitzavim, for example, the pasuk says, "Vayashlichem el eretz acheres kayom hazeh." The Bnei Yisrael got kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. Vayashlichem, they'll be cast aside. So the lamed in the word Vayashlichem is a big lamed. So yes, why is the lamed a big lamed? And he says it's a remez to lamed shloshim, is gematria 30. It's a gematria of the 10. When Bnei Yisrael were going to Galus, the Gemara says in Maseches Rosh Hashanah and Daf Lamed Aleph, like he quotes, that there are 10 masos, 10 travels that the Shechina goes into Galus, and then the Sanhedrin also went into 10 stages of Galus, and also Bnei Yisrael went into 10 stages. So to represent the 10, 10, 10, the 30 is marked big in this word Vayashlichem el eretz acheres kayom hazeh. We'll get to this week's parsha in a minute, and another one. This is one of my favorites. Again, these are just based on little psukim, little words, little letters. I'm saying, but. The pasuk says when it talks about taking a bribe. So the pasuk says in Parshas Mishpatim, it's visalef divrei tzadikim, that someone who takes shochad, ki shochad yaver nei pichim, visalef divrei tzadikim. It blinds you. Okay. So the word tzadikim is spelled the way we thought it'd be spelled: tzadi dalid yud kuf yud mem. But the Chaim Kanievsky points out that nowhere else is the word spelled that way. It's always missing a yud. Okay, it never has the kuf yud, the tzadi dalid yud kuf yud mem. You don't have the two yuds in there. It's always one yud missing. So he asks, why over here is it spelled male? Is it spelled full with both yuds? So he says, because the Gemara says in Ksuvis and Kuf Hema Beis that even a tzaddik gomer, if he takes a bribe, he is going to be blinded. Meaning normally, people, really, there's no such thing as a tzaddik gomer. We say, "Ain't tzaddik ba'aretz asher lo yachata." No such thing as no one's perfect, right? But the Gemara says that even if there was a tzaddik gomer, a complete tzaddik, if he would take a bribe, it's going to blind his ability to see the truth. So therefore, the Torah over here writes the word tzaddikim in its full to teach you that even if there was a full tzaddik, perfect tzaddik, even he, if he would take a bribe, it would be blinded. And based on the Gemara in Ksuvis and Daf Kuf Hey Amud Beis. Okay, Parsha Shmini. Hey, this week's parsha. So let's learn a couple from here. He said the pasuk says in Perek Tes pasuk Beis, Vayishcharis ha'olah, Vayamtziu b'nei Aaron elav. So the sons of Aaron they shechted the olah, Vayamtziu, and they showed it to Aaron, and there the word Vayamtziu is missing a yud. Okay. But then he points out that right after that it says V'es ha'olah, by the emurim, by carrying all the limbs, not the blood, the limbs of the body. It says Vayamtziu, that they brought it to Aaron, and there it says Vayamtziu with a yud. So, basic question: how come here there is a yud? How come there is a yud? Again, now these are one of these questions that, first of all, even if you would have noticed it, Weiter, right? Nothing. What are you going to do with that one? Like, it's not. That's the Masorah. That's what we would have said. That's our Masorah, right? It's not. That wouldn't have been a kash if someone would have asked you. You would have had. Okay. So he says we have to answer that. So he says it's a very big difference. Because, of course, in the Mishnah Maseches Yoma, it says that when it comes to the blood, so that could be with one Kohen. He could bring it. But when it comes to bringing all the limbs of the animal, so that you need many, many different Kohanim to carry the whole thing. So therefore, he says that since a lot of people carrying it, so therefore Yamtziu is with a Yud to make it bigger, to make it show that many more people were involved in bringing it to Aaron. Okay, here this one's amazing. He says that the word beged, the psukim at the end of this parsha talk about clothing or pieces of material that become tamei. Okay, so how big does a piece of material have to be tamei? So a beged has to be gimel al gimel, 3 by 3. That's baos, right? 3 by 3. So 3 by 3 means that the area is 9. 3 times 3 is 9, right? That's the gematria beged. Okay, that's what he points out. And then he says, and let me tell you something else from my father, the stipler, Shlita. Okay, this was a long time ago. But he says that sak is also a type of material. So there the shear is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. Okay, so 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim is, and a tefach is 4 godlim. That's the size of a tefach. So therefore, like the Gemara says in Menachos and Daf Mem Aleph, and therefore in 4 tefachim is really 20 etzbos, 20 finger breaths, right? Al esrim etzbos. So you have 20 by 20 because it's 4 godlim, but 5 of the skinnier fingers. Okay, so 5 times 4 is 20. So it's 20 by 20, which equals 400, which is the gematria of sak. That was the Stipler's edition. And then he added, and also, or, if you have a piece of leather, so there, the size is chamisha tfachim al chamisha tfachim, 5 by 5, which is 25 squared. So that is or. Or is Roshei Tevos, ayin esrim, 20, vav v'chamisha, 5, 25, reish ribu ayin, squared. Okay, so that's the 25. And then he pointed out that it's also the same gematria as Ko'ama Katana. Fine. Then a Mapitz is a different size, it's a different gematria. Fine. So right away, he's like, in all the letters and everything to remember the sizes of all these different begadim. Then, another one, it says, the pasuk says, Mikola ochel asher yachel, asher yavo alav mayim yitma. That if you have food that gets wet, water falls on it, so now it can become mikabel tuma. That's if you touch it, it becomes tamei because it got wet. So it says over there the word yavo with a vav. Normally the word yavo is spelled yud bet aleph with no vav. Here it's spelled with a vav. So why is there a vav over here? So he says berov haTorah. Rov haTorah. Maybe, I guess it's spelled somewhere else. Because rov haTorah, the majority of the Torah, it's chaser. It doesn't have the vav. So why here is there a vav? There are another 6 types of liquids besides water that also could allow the fruit, the food to become royal kabel tuma. Meaning there's 7 mashkim. There's 7 types of liquids that if they fall onto the food, they become tamei. Water is just one of them. So here it says yavo mayim as the vav, extra vav there to teach you that's mayim, water, and then another 6 things that would fall on. So again, he's showing in the halacha in these things. Again, this is all over the place. I'm just picking some, we'll say fun ones, we'll call it. But it's mamish amazing, and the chizik that you get from seeing it here is, for me, again, everyone can take their own thing. From here, I see that like any little detail that you always thought, oh, this was an impossibility, and it's not a hashkafic question, it's not this. Every little letter of the Torah, every little nuance of a difference, anything is loaded. And Kanievsky was, I don't know anyone else that knows, I haven't seen any sefer like this. I guess that's what Abramsky was saying, that it's only a yachid in the door could do that. But there are answers to everything. We have to have bitachon, that the Torah is Torah Kedosha, and there's a strong Masorah of the Torah. Like, it's all there. Hashem gives us the matana once in a blue moon to find the person that is able to reveal for us all of these things. Okay, we'll jump, I guess, to the. Only 2 more minutes, so we'll jump to the end. So after the Sefer Taama D'Kra, there's a page. Okay, it's 2 pages. called Hanhagos V'Horos Merana Chazon Ish Zatzal Shmatim Pi Imi Marasi. Again, the Chaim Kanievsky's mother was a sister of the Chazon Ish. Okay, so it was his mother's yortzeit, so he wanted to put something out. So he wrote a page of things that he heard from his mother in the name of the Chazon Ish. Okay, that's a very important thing there. So over there he says in Sifkat and Yud Beis, it says, Ein lahorid b'Shabbos hapirurim v'apsoles mel shulchan biyadayim. A person, when he's cleaning off his table on Shabbos, this is a muksa question. Okay, a person shouldn't use his hand to clean off crumbs and other garbage on there. And I guess like a broom or something that is made for cleaning. Instead, he should go ahead and use another item like a handkerchief or something like that, or a paper towel or something. Napkin. That's what I wanted. That's the word. Napkin. Thank you. Okay, a napkin. You can go ahead and take a napkin and use it. Okay. Now, what's he coming to say over here? So in many of I was learning muksa at the time in the Mir, and in many of the Kitzer Hilchos Muksa Svarim, it says as follows. There's a famous machlokes. I'm not going to get into this right now. There's a machlokes about, are you allowed to things that are muksa? Can you move it al yidei davar acher? Can you go ahead and move it with something else? Because it's not your hand. You're using something else, so you move it. So the Taz is mekel. They allow to go ahead and use like a napkin or something like that. And the Chazon Ish in his Sefer was mega machmir. And rayas all over the place that you can't do that. Because really it's like an extension of your hand. Like, what's the big difference? At the end of the day, your hand is moving the whole thing. So very nice. You're wearing a glove and you didn't touch it with your skin, right? But at the end of the day, you move the napkin and you move the whole thing. Okay, so the Chazon Ish is machmir. So the Kitzer Svarim bring down that it's true that in the Sefer Chazon Ish, he was machmir, but you see that his own sister said that, you shouldn't use your hand, but you could use a napkin. So you see that he was mekel, and therefore halacha l'maisa, even if you'd want to, you'd learn like the Chazon Ish, you could be mekel. Okay. So at the time I was learning with a massive Talmid Chacham, mega big. He said to me, I told him, I said, you should know the Chazon Ish was mekel. He said, impossible. It's impossible. He said, it can't be that, you learn the Sefer Chazon Ish and you see he's bringing rise from all shots. It can't be that afterwards he was lenient, like a kilo against everything that he learned. That's not how it works. It can't be. Now you have to understand, the Chazon Ish was lenient in a lot of things. In Shemitah, a lot of areas, the Chazon Ish was mekel. People think, you're so machmir. A lot of areas he was mekel. Whatever he saw in the Torah, that's what he did. So he said, it's impossible. So I said, can we show you? It says it over here that he was mekel. And I said, and look at all these Kitzer Svarim. I showed him. I said, and they all bring down that even though in the Sefer Chazon Ish, he was machmir not to use the napkin, but here he says you could clean off the table with a napkin. So the person that I was with at the time, he said, that's not what it says. I said, what? The Kitzer Svarim say that. And I said, it's over here. What do you mean it doesn't say it? He says, it doesn't say it. He's coming to be machmir. Here he's coming to be machmir. I'm like, what? I said, I can't promise because it's not clear. But if I had to bet, he's talking about what we call graf shel re'i, something that's disgusting. Something that's disgusting, you're allowed to move with your hands. It's not muksa. Something that's gross, you're allowed to bothering the smell, whatever it is, you're allowed to move it out with your hands. So he's talking about that, and he's being machmir, that even that, you shouldn't use your hands, you should use something else. And I'm like, look, the major big people, poskim, that wrote in their Kitzer Svarim that's not what it says here. So I was torn. So this is my second letter. So this is when I realized, what am I, an idiot? I just ask him. I just ask him Chaim Kanievsky. Now, just that alone is an amazing thing. I just, the gadol ador, okay, and like you could just say, I could just ask him. You know what that means? If you have like a question about what the President of the United States said. Did he say like this or not? I'll just ask him. It's impossible. Here, the gadol ador, you could just ask him. You could just send a letter on Motzei Shabbos, and on Thursday you will get a response. So I wrote a letter. Okay, I had a few other things to write in there also, but that was my letter, and I asked. I said, question number 1. It says b'sefer Taama dekra, because of the ein lahorid b'Shabbat hapirurim v'apsoles ma'shulchan b'yadayim. Shouldn't put it with your hands. You should use something else. So I asked, Ha'ima kavanahi lahachmir? Did you mean to be machmir? The afapi, that even though shugraf sharei, it's a disgusting thing on the table, you must use something else, and you're not allowed to use your hand. Oh, or did you mean hakavana lahakel? You meant to be lenient, kidasa taz, like the taz. When you need the area on the table, the bones or the leftovers are there on the table, you're allowed to go ahead and scrape it off with a davar acher, like a knife or something like that. So I asked him, coming to be machmir or coming to be mekel? And he wrote back, hakavana lahachmir. He meant to be machmir. I'm like, wow. So the person that I went to, like the Taama that I went to, he's like, of course that's what I meant. I told you that. He didn't understand like why I was. I'm like, you don't understand. So what did I do? So then I wrote a letter. This was one of the most amazing things that ever happened in my life. I started writing a letter to all these other people that wrote these svarim. And I said, you should know, I wrote a letter to Chaim Kanievsky, and he told me that that's not what he meant over here. And one guy sent me his cell number. Not one guy. One gadol asked me, he gave me a cell number that I should call him. Do you want to discuss it with me? Another one wrote me back. I have a collection of everyone's responses. Okay, that was part one of the story. But I was in the mirror, and it became a big hawk. Everyone was hawking about it. So in the Otzar Asfarim, in the library over there, so there was someone reviewing the Sefer Orcho Shabbos. Orcho Shabbos became one of the major Kitzur Svarim on Hilchos Shabbos. Super easy to read and gives you the lumdus behind things and the sources. It's really, really amazing. And it was Matzliach Baruch Hashem in our door. Now it's up to, I think it's 4th volume. So volume 2 was about to come out. Volume 2 is about Muktzah. So there was someone proofreading the book. So he heard that I got a letter from Chaim Kanievsky about Muktzah. So and obviously in the Orcho Shabbos it said that even though in the Chazin said to be machmir, in the book it said to be mekel. So I showed him the letter, and he couldn't believe it. Someone else wrote another letter. I have a copy of it to Chaim Kanievsky. Again, basically asking the exact same question, just switched around the words a little bit, just to make sure. And it came out the exact same way, that he was coming to be machmir about a graf sharei, and chas v'shalom not to be mekel, like the Taz, not different than the Chazon Ish in the Sefer. And in the Orcho Shabbos Chelik Beis, it's brought down that the Chazon Ish was machmir, and in the footnote it says, and even though some people quote that it means to be mekel, based on a letter to Chaim Kanievsky, it says over there that his kavanah was a hachmir. This is an amazing thing. Now, okay, it's interesting, limud, I guess, but by me, the limud is a side point. The fact that I was able to just write a letter to Chaim Kanievsky and get an answer, and then we had to ask a second letter afterwards. I think that's amazing. That's an amazing thing. That the accessibility that people had. I understand that people want to go visit, and it was hard to get in, and things like that. I got that. But the etzem, he was available, and when he could, he would. He really. It's a tremendous chizuk to us. Sometimes we get a little bit, it bothers us to be around people, or get annoyed and things like that. His minute, halavai, is anything close to our 45 minutes or an hour that we try to give us a person. To take a chizuk from this, first of all, to pay attention to every little detail in the Torah and realize even if you have a kasha and even if there's something that looks a little interesting to you, we'll call it, you have to realize that you have to have a tremendous emunah and bitachon, that there's a lot there, and there are people out there that can answer. We have to try to access that and find that and daven to Hashem that He should send us the answer that we want to have. And the accessibility to be able to answer our questions was really a tremendous sign of anivus and godless in the highest level. That a gadol doesn't mean just to stay up and away, and it means to connect to the people, and that's what he did through these letters. Okay, Bez Hashem, we'll try to continue. Shkoyach.